I can see why the topaz earring led you to Madame Yanko. And I can even see why the chip tooth ruled out Graves as a suspect. But how in heaven's name did you deduce that Guy Hetherington and Madame Yanko were one and the same person?
Almost transparent, my dear Watson.
I confess I can't see it.
Pass the tea like a good fellow, would you? Do you recall the maid asked Madame Yanko for a light just before the guests were about to arrive?
Yes, I vaguely remember something about that.
I should not be so preoccupied with Lady Carlton's décolleté just that moment.
Well, confound it, Holmes. She was brushing the hem of her dress and her cleavage practically spilled onto the carpet.
Be that as it may, had your eyes been with Madame Yanko, you would have noticed a slight involuntary movement of her right hand as it half darted towards her breast pocket.
Madame Yanko had no breast pocket.
Precisely, Watson. Breast pocket is not normal accoutrement in women's clothing, although it is fairly standard on a man's.
Well, I say, Holmes, that was a piece of luck.
Luck had nothing to do with it, old chap. 2 shoes, please. Do you recall the guests were arriving in the Great Hall, how the ladies all seemed to be arriving in one large bunch? Do you remember anything odd as they were standing before the looking glass in the Great Hall?
Only they were preening themselves like jackdaws, as they always do.
All but one.
Madame Yanko.
It was a pitiful boner on Hetherington's part. After all, what woman who was truly a woman could possibly pass for a chance of admiring herself in a looking glass? That, I fear, was the fatal giveaway. No cream, Watson.
Well, I must say, let us marry dance. For a while I thought we were all boners. Still, I suppose it's always darkest before the dawn.
Not strictly true.
Eh?
Not meteorologically speaking. Actually, the hours between 3 a.m. and 4:15 are normally those of densest darkness, and the sun is furthest both from sunset and sunrise. Just a twisted planet.
Confound it, Holmes. I wasn't talking about meteorological what's-it-call-it, but about our hopeless situation. Before the Star came in with 15 of the burliest constables and turned off those gas jets, well, I thought we were all for it.
Precisely what Hetherington would have liked to believe, but being as poor a scientist as he is a female impersonator, he never realized that when you have 12 people crammed together in a small stone cellar as we were, breathing out carbon dioxide, that the effects of vaporized cyanide are greatly diluted.
You mean we would not have snuffed it?
Not a chance.
I didn't know that.
Nor did he, and since his aim was our collective asphyxiation, I decided it prudent to not offer the information. Have you stirred it?
Holmes, you astonish me.
Nonsense, Watson. Any schoolboy using elementary intelligence and an applied grammar school education could have arrived at precisely the same conclusion. Providing, of course, he was supremely gifted. And the last time that clock refused to chime was on that fateful day when I set off for the Reichenbach Falls for my last encounter with Professor Moriarty.
What? What could it possibly mean?
You know, Watson, that something untoward is about to happen.
No! Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Holmes. It's this letter that Dr. Watson wrote in. It's from my cousin in Dundee. It says my grandfather is in a terrible condition and probably will not last Dr. Wilkins.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Mrs. Hudson. You were very close with her.
Oh, not what you would call close.
You was a distant relative then?
Well, not what you would say distant.
Neither distant nor close.
To tell you the truth, I never even knew my grandfather was still alive.
My dear woman, why indulge in the shroud of melancholy?
Come, Holmes. can't you see the woman is upset?
Oh, I'm very attached to all of our relations because there's so few of them. And the idea of any one of them passing away is just terrible, terrible, terrible.
What you mean is you're hopelessly sentimental and haven't even a clue as to who you're worrying about.
That's not true, Mr. Holmes. No, I know my grandfather very well. My mother talked of him often. I can't take him by profession, you know. He can take great pride in tending all the flowers in the local cemetery.
Pushing up the daisies might be construed as a continuation of his normal duties.
He from him for 9 to 20 years.
Well, that should make his passing all the more tolerable, I expect.
Oh, but it don't. It's very confusing to suddenly mourn someone you never even knew was alive. It's a string on your heartstring.
I can quite see that, Mrs. Hudson, quite.
Do stop sobbing, Mrs. Hudson.
Oh, I can't help it. My whole family's always been so emotional, you know. They cry at weddings, anniversaries, baptisms, communions. They never could contain themselves.
In Constance, Mrs. Hudson, it's never all to boast about.
Oh, you're being beautifully callous to an employee and a good friend. Can't you see the woman is in a state?
Is there something specific we can do for you, Mrs. Hudson?
I must go to him.
I see.
He's asking for me, it says so in the letter.
Even though he never even knew you?
I'm his only other living relation.
And how long do you expect this little pilgrimage will take?
I don't know. It only says he's near the end. I don't know when he's actually going to pass over.
Given the tendency of the Scots to not part with anything already in their possession, I expect he might linger on for a decade or so. I can certainly be this fat and rather disconsolate condition.
Holmes, how do you possibly think of your own comfort when the poor woman is so bereaved?
Should not be read yet, Watson.
I must see the poor man is asking for me.
Of course you must, Mrs. Hudson. You go right along. Holmes and I will be fine to get back, won't we, Holmes?
You really feel you must, Mrs. Hudson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Holmes. I knew you'd understand.
Of course, we will withhold your week's wages until your return.
Holmes, really, I think you could do better than that.
Strictly speaking, since it is Wednesday, I believe we should withhold this week's wages as well.
Don't you fret, Mrs. Hudson. Holmes likes us as a joke. You go right along. You can take my hansom. It's standing just outside. And if you need anything while you're in Dundee, wire me immediately.
Oh, you're a saint, Dr. Watson. You truly are.
Do try to be philosophical, Mrs. Hudson. After all, if your grandfather is really dying, then your bedside lamentations will only be providing a relevant musical accompaniment. Whereas here on Baker Street, you're tending the living, who indeed have a very real need of you.
Well, I worry about you, Mr. Holmes. Ever since you started smoking all that, you know what?
I beg your pardon.
Smells like flaming pink New York.
Your impertinence, Mrs. Hudson, is almost as odious as your sentimentality. Very well, take your week's wages and whatever other expenses you require, and go tend the dying. God knows if it doesn't prepare them for heaven, it will certainly give them a tart taste of hell.
Don't mind him, Mrs. Hudson. You know how he gets after a bad case. Remember, if you need anything, just telegraph.
God bless you, Dr. Watson. God bless you. Smells like that cool there.
Holmes, you behaved abominably to that old woman. You should be thoroughly ashamed of yourself.
Watson, your innate gullibility is quite the match for Mrs. Hudson's county guile. I've never heard such a cock and bull story in my life.
You mean you don't believe her?
I do not speak of proof, Watson, but as we all know, the twin obsessions of the working class have always been absenteeism and tardiness.
But if you're an emotional sort of person, it's perfectly natural to wish to visit an ailing relative.
Even more so if you fancy a vacation with pay.
She's hardly got that now, has she?
Mrs. Hudson, my dear Watson, knows perfectly well which side the scone is buttered. I've had a beastly lot, these Scots, thought by some to be the lost tribe of Israel. There's good reason to believe it. They're as mean as buggery and tight as 6 toes in a sock. The Scotsmen have been known to return from the grave to claim the pennies from their eyelids.
Holmes, I don't know what's been getting into you of late, but some of your ideas are almost alarming.
Also, if all the timber in the North American continent were laid end to end, they would not even begin to bridge the gap between my insights and your perceptions.
If I didn't know you better, I would take offense to every 10th word you uttered.
Which would make me fiercely scrutinized while the other 9 were having no effect. Drat! The first bit of fruits of Mrs. Hudson's untimely departure. Now I must answer the door myself.
Don't fret, Holmes. You're getting to be like an old woman. I'll get the door.
What is it, what?
Hand-delivered letter.
Letter, eh? Why, it's from a Moriarty.
Moriarty? He's dead. How can it possibly be?
What's the Moriarty? A Moriarty. Mr. Simeon Moriarty, son, as it appears, of the deceased professor.
I never knew Moriarty had a son.
Villain as he was, I still expect he was capable of biological reproduction.
What's he said?
Quite a stylist, much better than his late unlamented father. Mr. S. Holmes is a salutation, planted to the point. Having recently returned from foreign parts, I've only just been advised of your role in my father's untimely death, which, to put a finer point to it, one could call murder. You should understand that the Moriarty clan was fired in the crucible of family pride, and that the inevitable corollary of that pride is the appetite for revenge. A revenge which is implacable, and which neither God, nor man, nor Sherlock Holmes can possibly gainsay. Be advised, therefore, that appropriate measures will be taken to redress these heinous wrongs, and due punishment meted out to their contemptible instigator, your obedient servant, Simeon Moriarty.
It's just a hoax. I wouldn't give it a second thought.
It's just an enclosure. You would know the hornet's sting, seek the insect in his nest, but do not dare to cut his wing, or never shall your heart know rest.
All the dash. Hornet's sting, cut his wing, rubbish.
That won't stand comparisons with Tennyson, I grant you, but then the intention is quite different.
What intention?
You would know the hornet's sting, seek the insect in his nest.
It's poppycock. Some crank, I shouldn't wonder.
Do not dare to cut his wing, or never shall your heart know rest.
Doggerel, penny farthing rhymes.
And yet crystal clear in intent.
Holmes, what do you mean? I can't make heads or tails of it.
What it means, my dear Watson, is that within a very short period of time, perhaps only days, there is every likelihood that I shall be murdered. So sorry to have kept you. I find I can't go a day without Porcherini's minuet, one of my many addictions. You wish to see me?
Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
At your service, Miss...
Moriarty. Liza Moriarty.
Do take a seat.
I see that my name has had some effect upon you.
Did you expect it should not?
Indeed, I would have been quite astonished had it not.
Would you care some tea and scones?
That would be lovely. It was a rather long, dusty journey, and I...
Oh, the blast! My housekeeper is away. I'm sorry. I should have to withdraw my impetuous offer of hospitality.
Think nothing of it. I had half a glass of barley water before boarding the train.
Very prudent of you. Now then.
Mr. Holmes, I know you received a letter from Simeon.
Simeon?
My brother.
I see you are...
I am Professor Moriarty's daughter.
Quite a prodigious progeny for a man who spent most of his life on the run. I'm sorry. I seem to have touched a nerve.
I cannot begin to defend my father, Mr. Holmes. I and the whole world besides know what he was and the evil that he wrought. But when all is said and done, he was my father, and I still feel an odd twinge as though ill respect.
So you should, my dear. After all, the good that men do lives beyond them. The evil is often interred with their bones.
I believe you have that the wrong way round, Mr. Holmes.
I know. I do find Shakespeare so much more amusing that way. Would you care for a little sherry?
That would be refreshing.
Gosh, the sherry's all gone. I confirm no inheritance for not having finished the stock. I do apologize. apologize.
Think nothing of it. Sherry is a trifle reckless this early in the day.
You were saying?
Simeon, my brother. But first, Mr. Holmes, allow me to explain. I've only come to know my brother. For much given to self-abuse, he spent his formative years living in America. I've only renewed my acquaintance with him and a belated memorial service for my father.
At?
The Memorial Hall of Clemency.
Yes, I remember receiving an invitation, but unfortunately I was detained in Marrakesh at the time.
I was quite relieved. A parental tie, Mr. Holmes, is like a hoop of steel. And no matter how Christian one tries to be, I doubt I'd have been able to suppress a natural animosity towards the murder of my father.
You do know the circumstances of our unfortunate encounter.
Perfectly, and there's no need to explain. The reason my father never mentioned Simeon or myself is surely self-evident. He felt if you or members of the police knew of our existence, certain pressures would be exerted in order to ferret him out. As neither Simeon or I had any knowledge as to his whereabouts, these pressures, had they been exerted, would have been pointlessly cruel. For that reason, my father never mentioned his progeny to anyone.
And your mother?
I was coming to that.
I don't wish to pry.
If anyone is entitled to the facts, Mr. Holmes, you certainly are. Do you remember the case of the vinegar stain cafe?
Yes, quite clearly.
Then you will recall that after a variety of unfortunate circumstances, you pursued my father to an old mill near Howlsby, Dorset, when you temporarily lost the scent.
Yes, I remember the search was called off after 5 days, and then Moriarty was sighted at Christchurch Abbey disguised as a choir boy.
What you never knew was that during those 5 days, when he appeared to have vanished off the face of the earth, he was actually being hidden by a coloratura soprano who used the old mill as a practice studio.
But where in heaven's name?
There was a trap door. It led to the cellar, where in that dark dungeon, my mother, due to the turbulence of her musical ability, was prevented from practicing anywhere else in Dorset. Used to run scales from dawn until dusk. It was only after balancing on a precarious rafter for 24 hours that my father realized he was not alone in the old mill. Hearing the sounds of the diatonic scale emanating shakily from somewhere behind the mill, he searched, located the trapdoor, and eventually found my mother. At first, she was frightened out of her wits, but he made a clean breast of everything, told her he was being hounded by the police, and threw himself on her mercy. She responded to his entreaties, being soft-hearted and Episcopalian. Having been hounded out of the music school throughout Dorset, she knew what it was like to be a man on the run. Nothing would have occurred at this encounter had it not soon transpired that my father possessed a flashing baritone voice and knew by heart most of the selections my mother happened to be practicing. Keeping to a tremulous sotto voce, so as not to give away the whereabouts, the two began to perform a series of duets, from Mendelssohn to Spohr. The softness of their tone, made necessary by the precariousness of my father's situation, soon engendered an intimacy. For I'm sure you know, Mr. Holmes, it is impossible to sing duets from Mendelssohn to Spohr in hushed tones without some kind of bond springing up. Before long, my father realized he had met the woman of his heart during a rather impassioned Allegro vivace from La Forza del Destino. My father, who virtually dissolved before the sway of Verdi, succumbed to my mother's eve of high C, and intimacies followed hard upon.
But surely Moriarty did not just leave after that.
He had no intimation that his musical duet was to bear fruit. Despite his cunning and his guile, he was untutored in biological matters. It was some months before my mother had enough courage to inform him of the birth of twins.
But how did she manage to track him down? He was in the best of times the most elusive of men.
Before he left her in the old mill, he devised an ingenious scheme of communications by way of the personal columns of the public prints. He instructed my mother to advertise passing of various imaginary clergymen from remote parts of Great Britain, using a code known only to him and her. Thus, one Sunday, when he read the words, "In eternal and loving memory, Vicar Aspinall Pratt, late Abbaston with, now resident in paradise," immediately he'd become the father of twins.
And your mother?
My life, no less my father's, has been pockmarked with tragedies, Mr. Holmes. Due to an anonymous benefactor, who was undoubtedly my father, my mother soon achieved the concert stage. She gave a premiere recital at the Wigmore Hall, 24 November, 1889.
24 November 1889? But wasn't that the
You
day?
remember it. I thought you might, though not half as well as I.
I remember reading short notice about it in the Times. It was a macabre incident.
After the last encore, during a tremendous ovation, the casters of the concert grand came loose from their moorings, and as the pianist hit the opening chords, spores blooming in my heart, which you probably know is a wild cascade of B-flats. The instrument broke loose, came hurtling down towards the unsuspecting soloist, pinned her against the side of the stage, and lodged itself into her abdomen. The hammers of the upper octave were wet neatly into a diaphragm, and though a series of delicate operations managed to remove everything from E-flat to F Pisces, the damage was irreversible.
A grim and fascinating account, madam, but I fail to see what all this
Has to do with you. I was coming to that.
Would you care for an apple or some grapes, perhaps? Oh, my God! Even the fruit rolls may cry. I do apologize. I'm usually not so virulent. You're my odious housekeeper.
No matter. Fruit is somewhat binding before dinner. The letter, Mr. Holmes.
Letter?
I know all about it. Simeon told me about it. Just as he described the gory tales of the road he intends to wreak upon you. You must leave London at once.
My dear lady, I do appreciate your concern for my welfare, but surely you must realize that a day without the threat of my life is bonjour sans soleil.
But so long as you remain, he will continue to make attempts on your life.
And if I leave, why do you not pursue me, as indeed I pursued his notorious father?
Once he's had time to assimilate the shock, he will forgo his desperate plans.
If he is a true Moriarty, and your story leads it down by that sword, then he will pursue his being ashamed to their preordained conclusions. Surely you must see that.
But I wish to make an end of this hideous enmity. My mother is dead, my father is dead. My brother is all I have left, and if he continues this path, he will surely come to ruin.
I do understand your dilemma, Miss Moriarty, but surely you must realize that I have no choice if my life is threatened but to defend it.
There is one.
And that is?
If I can find him, if I can lead you to him, would you promise to reason with him? The actual confrontation with Sherlock Holmes would be enough to dispel his wild fancies.
And what if I cannot dissuade him? What if the sight of me so incensed him that he strikes immediately and eventually hangs for it? Then you have the blood of two men on your hands.
Then I myself will keep him under lock and key, for I would rather have him than stand in trial for attempted murder.
There is one other aspect to this, Miss Moriarty, which you fail to consider. That is that I am Sherlock Holmes, a name and a reputation well known throughout these British Isles, and I dare say well beyond them. You're asking me to go to a young hothead, your own description, and dissuade him from a vengeful course of action, the inference being to the uninformed that I fear his designs.
But you know that isn't true.
And I know that, you know that, but unfortunately the press would scrutinize the whole rather than the donut.
But if you can restrain Simeon, I shall tell the world the true story. And then your behavior, rather than smacking of cowardice, would be wreathed in magnanimity. There is a boy whom you could have crushed as you did his father. Instead, you have given him a stern reprimand and an opportunity to mend his ways.
Put that way, I must say it does have a certain ring to it.
You will do it?
But you say if you can find him, who's to say you can?
If anyone can find him, Mr. Holmes, I certainly can. One nicely phrased item in the obituary column of the Times will do the trick. I've always heard that the reason Sherlock Holmes is known as the Great Sherlock Holmes is his ability to temper justice with charity.
My dear Miss Moriarty, you're as eloquent as you are charming. Very well, you have a bargain. Bring me the young hothead, and I shall endeavour to cool his brow at the cold conquest of reason.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I lost my head.
Well, we gave immediately, Miss Moriarty. Most effusions of that sort of dry rot that weaken the timbers of masculine resolve.
I'm sorry. It will never happen again.
On the other hand, don't make any long-range plans you may have to later amend.
The terms are completely fair, Mr. Holmes. If I cannot find my brother and bring him to you in 2 weeks' time, I shall steel myself for the consequences of his actions and your own.
Good.
One last thing. Simeon would be furious if he knew of my coming here. So when next I have news, rather than risk a return visit, I shall send it by carrier pigeon.
Pray tell me manage that.
During a brief family reunion in Capistrano, my father taught me to train birds for the express purpose, as he felt messages sent by normal routes were sure to be tampered with. It was one of his more fanciful ideas.
On the contrary, Miss Moriarty, I expect the theory is sound and may well account for the long shores of an atrocious postal service. It strikes me, Miss Moriarty, that there is one refreshment I can offer. I've bought a little Chateauneuf du Pape 1798, which I keep for very special occasions, which of course this is certainly one. Would you be rash enough to indulge with me? You have the brightest, most intense and exciting eyes I've ever seen in a woman.
Everyone tells me I get them from my father.
This may be, Mr. Holmes, but the fact remains this letter constitutes a threat on your life, and I'm obliged to take it seriously.
You may take it as seriously as you wish, Lestrade.
And so should you, Mr. Holmes. This is no ordinary crank, you know. This is the son of the most notorious scoundrel that ever prowled the streets of London. And if he's half the man his father was, he's a threat for every decent person a miles around. So we've taken some sudden precautions.
If you're referring to those beefy bobbies you got posted outside my front door, Lestrade, I tell you they have to go. All that Brussels brain is lowering the tone of the entire neighborhood.
I could always put them into plain clothes.
Why, if your plain clothes are anything to go by, it would be a medical slum.
You may think all this is a big joke, but Dr. Watson and I feel
So you've consulted with Dr. Watson.
When I received that letter, I felt it my duty to discuss the matter with all people directly concerned.
Excluding myself, who was of course most directly concerned.
Dr. Watson and I and all of Scotland Yard have your best interest at heart, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, bollocks.
Still, Dr. Watson and I thought it would be a good idea. I wonder what's become of him. We arranged to meet here at 2:30, and it's not like him to be late.
To meet here?
To try to persuade you to take some protective measures in this matter, Holmes.
Lestrade, your cloying sense of paternalism is really becoming quite obnoxious. I had never before required the aid of Scotland Yard in my personal or professional dealings, and I'm not about...
Stand back, Mr. Holmes. There's someone in that closet.
Astonishing deduction,
He
Lestrade.
may be armed.
Highly unlikely he would be thumping the door with his elbows.
Good God, Dr. Watson! What are you doing in there? How did you get into that closet? What in heaven's name has happened to you?
I believe the answer to all those questions might be facilitated by your removing the gag from the poor fellow's mouth.
Watson, are you all right? Drink. Drink. Good God, man. You look terrible. How long have you been in that closet? What in heaven's name has happened to you? You gave me quite a start, I can tell you. What a turn it did.
Quite all right, Watson.
Barely.
Roast Lestrade. Have another.
Thanks, Holmes. What's that, for God's sake? I'm not at all sure. I was just sitting in my study correcting a few pages for my next edition. I heard this buzzing against the window pane. Came in to have a look. The next thing I knew, everything went black. About 2 minutes ago, I woke up and everything was still black. I started banging my elbows against the door and then you came. Did you get a look at it once? Not a glance, I'm afraid.
This, I believe, was a visitor at the window.
Well, that's just a dead worm, isn't it?
A hornet, actually, ingeniously glued to the window to create as much racket as possible. You see, it's actually stung the glass.
A hornet?
Yes, Watson, I believe we were given notice of a hornet sting some short while ago in a published piece of light verse.
What's all that about?
Never mind, Lestrade. Go on, Watson.
But there's nothing more to tell. I came in, opened the window, and then
whoever it was arranged the hornet sting, placed a small rag of chloroform over your face, bound and gagged you hand and foot, put you in that closet, leaving the way he got in. With the window ledge out down to the drain pipe and to the street below. You can actually still smell the pigments of chloroform on your hotel.
who in heaven's name would want to do that?
I believe that this perhaps would contain the answer to all of our questions.
A letter? Pinned to his jacket like a baby? What's it say, Mr. Holmes?
It's addressed to myself.
But what's it say?
Never mind, Lestrade.
God's sake, Holmes, I've got a perfect right.
You stick your nose wherever you please, Lestrade, but that was my personal post. And now I must insist that you call off your bulldogs at once. If this bumptious boy believes he succeeded in rattling my composure and informing the formidable troops of Scotland Yard, it would only inspire him to new and more outrageous pranks, but if we do nothing at all, he will eventually desist.
You could work in reverse, Mr. Holmes. If we paid him no mind, he might get wilder in his schemes.
Lestrade, you have my guarantee that within 48 hours, Simeon Moriarty will be in your custody. You must give me your word, Lestrade.
Mr. Holmes, I can't.
As an inspector.
I can't possibly.
As an Englishman.
It'd be far too dangerous.
As a servant of the Queen. Good man, Lestrade. Now, I want you to head out the door, looking normal as possible. No scowls or furrowed brows. Try whistling as you stroll down the pavement.
If I do, I'll have a dozen bodies at my heels within seconds.
Quite right, but just hum quietly to yourself.
I don't know how to hum.
Then just look blank. Everything must appear to be normal.
Mr. Holmes, this is...
Lestrade, I appreciate your cooperation on all this, and I shall make a point of mentioning to the Commissioner when we next have tea.
Good day, Mr. Holmes.
Are you quite all right, Watson?
Yes, a little the worse for wear. It's not very cozy in that wardrobe.
Still, I don't imagine it was a very long ordeal. It would have been out for more than 10 minutes.
How do you know that, Holmes?
By the faintness of chloroform on your lapel. Obviously, your antagonist meant you no real harm.
Wasn't that letter, Holmes?
Yes, quite a stylist, this young Moriarty. One thinks that he got for literature rather than crime, he would fare much better.
What's he say?
As you can see, Mr. Holmes, I can penetrate your inner sanctum whenever I choose. Take this little encounter with Dr. Watson as a preamble to what is in store for yourself, although you will not get off quite so lightly as your addle-brained stooge. Signed Simeon, already on first-name terms.
Addle-brained stooge. With a little
Why,
brat.
Watson, don't you think he's just trying to rattle us with these undergraduate hijinks? Foolishness, parading his wit. Anything be more British.
Holmes, this fellow may be a puny youth as far as you're concerned, but he is a Moriarty. Therefore, there's no telling what he might do.
No piffle.
Holmes, you're taking this much too lightly.
Watson, I realize you're still a little bit foggy, but certainly you recognize the sound of the front doorbell.
Should I? And why not? What if it's...
Anyone who would take the trouble to climb to a third-floor window ledge to glue a hornet to the glass would not be so uncomplicated as to stroll through the front door. Or must I answer myself?
going? Not a sign of anyone. This is parcel left outside your door. What do you make of that, Holmes?
an unconventional piece of stone cutting, not remarkable for either shape or texture.
Read it, Holmes. Read what it says.
In memory of Sherlock Holmes, who was rash enough to believe he could outwit the son even as he underestimated the father, born June 1846, died September 1897.
There's one more week left in September.
What a bloody cheek!
Eh?
Diabolical audacity!
Well, don't let it upset you, Holmes.
Outrageous gall!
It's a joke and very poor
To
taste.
make me out to be 51 when I'm not a day over 43! Watson, I want you to muster every atom of scientific objectivity you possess and answer me truthfully. Do I look 51?
Oh, Holmes,
Don't hedge down and don't stammer. Do I give the appearance of a man well into middle age on the upper rounds of 50?
Well, don't fret, Holmes. He obviously just had his arithmetic.
Oh, it's all well for a man of your advanced age. Tell me not to fret, or you'll never even see 60 again.
Come, Holmes.
It's quite another thing for some ghost youth to accuse me in print of having one foot in the grave.
Well, Holmes, what's far more important than the print on this morbid stone is its fiendish implication. Obviously, the boy means to do you in, no matter what his sister may say.
There's very little weather in this face. No inroads to speak of, no hairpin bends. Even my smile is remarkably wrinkle-free, won't you say, Watson?
A damn striking face, Holmes.
There's no frost threatening the brow, no furrows. Back is straight and firm, an exclamation point, not an interrogation mark. A goodly frame, won't you say, Watson?
Olympic standard.
The lustre in the eyes is bright, the voice capricious and resonant, winningly useful when it chooses to be.
Covent Garden standard, no one would dispute it.
And yet this sniveling Greenfield boy has insinuated chronology of 51 years.
Holmes, what are you going to do about this threat on your life?
Do, Watson, we will do nothing at all. Using the dirigible of our wider perspective and the helium of our lofty breeding, we shall endeavour to rise above it.
What about Liza Moriarty?
Well, our appraisal of her wayward brother's character seems to be quite accurate. But we've made a bargain and we shall stick to it.
Holmes, I know you very well. If there's anyone who can get round you, it's a pale-skinned, fine-boned woman with brown hair, who perfectly matches the description you've given me of Miss Moriarty.
Oh, balderdash.
You can understand that deny you have a weakness for a woman of her appearance.
My curiosity for Simeon Moriarty does grow daily, and I shall quite religiously encounter when it does take place. But now, I think I need a little smoke.
I see. Well, in that case, I'd be getting along. I do really wish you'd take this more seriously, Holmes.
Matters of life and death are just flotsam and jetsam, my dear Watson, but a full pipe is a good smoke.
Who said that?
Why not? Did your hearing perspective?
I'll look in on you tomorrow.
Do so.
Holmes, be careful.
I shall not rest until I have his testicles in the palm of my hand.
Holmes, this is absolutely insane. Let me ring up the star. At least tell him where we are.
As expressly contrary to the instructions, Watson, I do not wish to appear uncavalier.
You know nothing about it, Holmes.
Neither.
This Simeon, this crazy brother of hers. Who's to say he hasn't arranged this whole thing as a trap? Who's to say they aren't together?
Watson, don't you think I've taken all the necessary precautions?
What precautions?
And every aspect of Liza Moriarty's story has been checked out. The mill in question does have an antechamber. It did have a small upright installed against one of the walls. Moriarty's wife and this charming girl's mother did die on the day and in the manner in question. The character of Simeon Moriarty's hand suggests an unstable personality with a marked proclivity towards rash action. The P's and T's are precisely those of a man consumed with revenge, whereas the I's and O's of Miss Moriarty's hand, seen in the letter informing us of this tryst so conveniently received by carrier pigeon, are those of a straightforward and honest person with an unblemished character. The pieces seem to fit together quite nicely.
Look at this place. Who's to say this man, the man who wrote that letter, hasn't lured you here to wreak that very revenge you say is burning in his bosom? I beg you, Holmes, let me bring the straw. If anything should happen...
Yes, Watson?
Well, need I spell it out for you, Holmes? Not a soul in the world knows where we are. If this Moriarty girl been leading up the garden path, we may be in great danger.
When Professor Moriarty left this vale of tears, all real danger left with him. There never was and never would be an intellect quite so toxic as his, and while he was alive, my life was in constant danger. Now that he is gone, there is no one, no thief, no assassin, no confidence trickster, quite so deadly he cannot be disarmed by my superior intelligence. One may well call that arrogance.
Indeed, one may.
But like all my other deductions, it is based on verifiable fact.
Where are we, anyway? Why do we have to come such a roundabout about it? We'll never find our way back.
Well, like his father, the boy has a tendency towards the dramatic. It's the only place his sister would agree to meet him, and she could not risk rousing his suspicions by suggesting another locale.
If what she said is true, what if it isn't? What if the two of them are in together?
To put your heart at ease, Watson, if I tell you that the meeting was scheduled for 11 p.m.
11? It's only 7:30.
Exactly. I want to get here well in advance of either Miss Moriarty or her brother. There is a worm which I doubt. The early bird I am led to believe has the odds-on chance of catching it.
Thank God you're still taking your way up there, Holmes. I had a terrible fear this girl turns your head. Well, shall we go?
Certainly not.
But they won't be here till close on midnight.
And therefore no traps can be devised.
Damn it, Holmes. I really don't know where I am with you. One moment you tell me it's all right, the girl can be trusted, and the next you're talking about traps being set.
Also, as I have said to you many times, the only way to treat a woman is to speak to her as though she were an angel and assume she is a servant. What have we here?
More borrowed chairs in.
Or a dentist chair, some such.
I'm sure there are no trap doors or anything.
Quite solid. I tested them a moment ago with my hollow-field boots.
What about the exits?
Well, there's only this winding staircase leading up to the street, and I had a look at it when we came in. It seems to be quite secure.
It's terribly dank in here. Why couldn't we just meet in a pub or something? What's this here, Holmes?
Room closet, I expect. Firmly locked from the outside.
I say, what have you got there, Holmes?
My stethoscope, Watson. Surely you're familiar with the breed. But in the highly sensitive form you see before you, capable of discerning the sound of human breathing at a distance of 20 feet. No, quite still.
I say, Holmes, I've never seen one of those before.
It's not standard issue at St. Bart's, I should imagine, having invented it myself only 6 months ago. Well, everything seems quite secure here. I think as long as we stay until the appearance of Miss Moriarty or her brother, there is no chance of any unexpected arrivals.
Holmes, what if this before he gets out of hand.
Out of hand, Watson?
Yes. What if he becomes incensed and tries to do the job right here and now? How do you ward him off?
You are fiendishly inquisitive, Watson.
Well, I'm not made of iron like you. I'm quite more than quite frightened.
If the boy does attempt any sudden lunges of any sort, I believe my own jiu-jitsu training would be equal to the situation. Not, this little ring will do the trick.
Ah, hit him with that. Holmes will barely scratch him.
Not hit him with it, spray him with it. A carefully prepared solution of sodium sulfate and spirit of ammonia. This is all from a tiny spout to the heart of this ingenious ring, causing severe blindness and sensory dislocation.
Holmes, I'm continually amazed by your knowledge of chemicals. How on earth do you come by it?
Watson, all these chemicals are available from any chemist shops without prescription. But you're dealing with chemicals all day. Surely you understand what a simple matter this is?
Confound it, Holmes. You're dealing with sophisticated compounds, not penny farthing oils and ointments.
As I have said to you before, Watson, the characteristic of great minds is the ability to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. Like changing water into wine.
I say, Holmes, what's this?
What's what, Watson?
Here, on this chair. Some lever.
Lever? Well, I'll be damned! I haven't seen one of these for years. It's an Frontenac chair.
The Frontenac?
Yes, developed by a demented French dentist in the 60s to help him seduce a young girl who consistently rejected his advances. He sat her down in this thing, ostensibly to fill her cavity, and it clamped down on her, just as this one has, and as I recall, he proceeded to ravage her mercilessly.
Good God.
Amazing replica of replica it is. I say, Watson, this certainly puts a different complexion on the charming Miss Moriarty in this entire matter. And I must say that in this instance your own fears are a bit more prudential than my own. Obviously it pays to be early. And now, how to get out of this thing?
But is that possible, Holmes?
Is what possible?
What you just said?
What did I say?
About my fears in this case being more prudential than your own. I mean, that's never happened before that I should have reached some kind of conclusion which was correct before yourself. Whereas it is in this case by means of a completely original deduction.
I don't mean to be rude, dear boy, but surely we could continue this analysis a little bit later.
But it's really quite remarkable, if it's true. I mean, deductions always have been your own special province. Your specialty, one might say. I didn't usually recognize them after the event, never beforehand. It's quite out of character.
Also, these straps are rather tight.
I know. I made them so they'll just pinch your skin enough to produce discomfort but not outright pain. Yes, you're quite right. Yet again, dear Sherlock. It is the Frontenac chair. Recently bought for a medical exhibition in St. Bart's. Quite a popular item it was, too. Not that anyone will miss it now, it's already on its way back to Birmingham. Or so the officials believe. And you are quite right. It does tip back. And as you can see, it is quite binding.
Also, since every action has an explanation, I assume this one does as well.
Undoubtedly, my dear Holmes, but isn't it curious? It's one which has not occurred to yourself. Why is that, I wonder? Well, I shall tell you, my dear Holmes. Perhaps you will find it elementary, because for me, for whom so many things have been elementary, this is perhaps the most elementary thing of all. You consider yourself like a student, quite observant, very good at uncovering clues, sifting evidence, observing details. How is it that in all your many exploits, or shall I say our exploits, you never noticed one recurring symptom, a trait which was present in every single case with which you dealt? I refer to a wince, a slight infinitesimal shiver that ran through my nervous system every time you asked me to corroborate some brilliant observation of your own. A wince which punctuated every deft comment you ever uttered in correcting the muggy little obscurities and confusions of my own pathetic mind. A wince which, if it could speak, would have said, arrogant, supercilious, egocentric, smug, and self-congratulatory bastard. How you enjoy lording it over your bumbly, slow-witted, treacle-minded aide-de-camp. yourself this morning, ever faithful Boswell, for whose benefit you credit your brilliance and your ingenuity. Oh, God, I can just imagine how insufferable Johnson must have been to his faithful recorder. Slowing down to catch every word of the telling epigram, every nuance of the well-trained phrase. Start very slowly, you know, very gradually. Where all great vendettas begin. Slight here, sarcasm there. Ego first bruised, then battered, then seething with convulsions of rage and dark dreams of revenge. A chance remark to the struggle, the point of which is, you noticed, I didn't. A passive remark to a mutual friend, the inference of which is, certain minds can grasp the innuendo while others cannot. Then gradually, taking your own superiority for granted, taking equally for granted my doziness, my backwardness, my innate lack of perception. But who am I? Did you ever ask the question? Or did you ever answer it further than to say my servant, my lackey, my lapdog? I am a doctor of medicine. I trained. I studied. I was honored at university. Received certificates. And won awards. When I walked down a hospital corridor, then I was no flunky, no lapdog, but a respected member of the medical profession, with a flair for literature and an enviable intellect. Later, after you had insinuated yourself and my personality into the minds of everyone who knew me, I was those things no longer. No, I was poor Bumbly Watson. You know, the good-natured stooge of that detective. No, not Watson, Holmes. Watson's the other one. The dull chap who never gets it quite right. Are you beginning to see, my dear Sherlock, the enormity of your crime? You cited everything that Moriarty ever conceived or executed pales, and nothing can redeem it, nothing with the supreme penalty.
Watson, you don't seem to have learned very much from your years of what I suppose we call servitude. Do you really believe you can get away with whatever preposterous action you're contemplating?
Most certainly, my dear Holmes, because I have learned from the master.
When Liza Moriarty gets here...
Liza Moriarty? You really are priceless. Bertha Walmsley. You don't know the name. Why should you? Just a poor, out-of-work actress, grateful for any role that affords some small remuneration, even if it's only playing a fictitious character named Liza Moriarty. But bumbly old Dr. Watson, given to playing practical jokes on his dear old friend Sherlock Holmes. Very underrated as an actress, too. She took you in quite well. But then I rehearsed her, so I suppose the credit is really mine. It took a while to find a pale, fine-boned brunette, but I did so want to find the kind of woman I knew you would appreciate. I did take pains, you know.
But that old mill in Dorset.
It's 2 miles away from a medical institute I visit each summer. 6 months ago, I arranged to have an upright piano stored in its antechamber.
But I read that article in the Times.
Which I never doubted you would. It refers to an absolutely true incident at which an unfortunate contralto was the victim of a rather grotesque accident. That part of her story was entirely true. The rest of the details of her background are my own somewhat melodramatic invention.
And that letter from Simeon
Was, as you so aptly put it, the work of a man consumed with revenge. Knowing fully Hollywood's usual expert powers to analyze that score, and since my scheme called for just such a character, I took it upon myself to write that letter in longhand. What bravado, I admit. But I bank on the fact that through all these years you have been so consumed with your own affairs and so oblivious in mine, there was little chance you would recognize my handwriting. After all, handwriting is, as you yourself have taught me, something very personal to a human being. And since in all these years you have never recognized me as a human being, there was little chance you'd recognize my hand. Now, my dear Sherlock, the reason I would always be the very last suspect on your list is because I am for you an invisible man. Like a doormat is invisible to you needed to wipe the boots on.
Do you really believe that this Miss Walmsley, whatever her name is, will really keep your little secret?
Certainly not. Out-of-work actresses are as unreliable as long-suffering general practitioners. It was important to select a performer who was not going to be around to stoke up any old codes. Swan's perfectly fit the bill, as she is suffering from acute consumption and has barely 6 weeks to live. A diagnosis I carried out carefully myself before recruiting her to my project. The sum of money provided for her assistance has enabled her to set sail for Australia, a country in which medical science is so backward, there's no chance she will see proper treatment. In 2 weeks, she'll be coughing up blood. In 4, she'll be bedridden. And in 6, it will all be mercifully over. The straps are quite ingenious, I assure you. Almost as ingenious as my own knots when I tied and gagged myself in that closet. And sprinkled a few drops of chloroform on my lapel where I knew without fail you would discover them. A bit extreme all that, but then I knew it would appeal to your sense of melodrama. It took hours to train that pigeon. A long, messy business, too. Doctoring that bloody cuckoo clock wasn't easy either.
Also, I believe I've underestimated you all these years, but you really must not persist in this fashion, because despite everything you've said, I still have some affection for you, and I'd hate to see you winding up with a dark charge with murder.
So would I, my dear Sherlock. That's why I've taken all the necessary precautions to avoid such a fate.
But have you, how will my disappearance be explained to others?
Well, apart from other skills acquired in your service, I've become an expert calligrapher. I got your own hand down to a T, and I, or rather you, have written the following letter which will be found in your Baker Street flat tomorrow morning, I expect. It reads as follows. Since the death of Professor Moriarty, I have found no challenge in the art of detection. Each case is just a repetition of former triumphs. So, in this my last communication to the world, I wish to make it known that I intend to dismantle the personage that has become Sherlock Holmes. So this is the last you shall hear of him in that guise. I'm going off to start a new life in another land, with a new name, and an entirely unremarkable personality. All future inquiries I direct to my trusty colleague, Dr. Watson, without whom my entire career would have taken quite another course. I like that last touch, don't you?
Do you really believe that will settle the matter? Why will you search for every continent on earth to seek me out?
Correct, my dear Holmes. In every metropolis there will be news of you. You receive time and time again. Hong Kong, Sydney, Innisbrook, Minneapolis. It'll always be Sherlock Holmes. There'll never be you.
Do you believe my friends would actually believe such a letter?
What friends? Lestrade? Mrs. Hudson? You have no friends. Only former clients, and they're no longer interested in you. The only friend is myself. And I shall see to it that your memory remains untarnished. I shall never deflate the myth of Sherlock Holmes. That you can be sure. You know, all this could have been avoided. Had you heeded my prophetic little quatrain, you would know the hornet's sting, seek the insect in his nest. What other insect is there in your disheveled nest but myself, a hornet, buzzing out your story to the world?
Now, the reason I could never unravel that puzzle, perhaps, is because I could never think of you as a hornet. A worm now, that would have been a better clue.
I sense the first niggles of spite. How welcome they are.
When Mrs. Hudson returns to London,
You might have mysteriously disappeared. And no one will be more forlorn and desperate than I. By then, of course, you'll discover that letter about her dying grandfather to be a cruel hoax. Another of my ingenious literary inventions. But her capacity for lamentation will not be wasted, and she'll have you to mourn and me to commiserate with. It is a grand design, you have to admit. Perhaps the grandest design ever concocted by the mind of man.
oh, you are mad, quite mad.
I know that. Quite mad. My own scientific objectivity tells me so. But, as with all madness, the first question the doctor must answer is, whence came the disease? What is its root and its cause? You are the root and cause of my disease, dear Sherlock. Concocted by myself, capable of killing in seconds. within a matter of hours, thoroughly and efficiently eradicated human flesh, leaving only a whittled down skeleton, like a chicken bone, but clean. Of course, to do its job efficiently, it must not be diluted with oxygen. Thus, with the precaution of turning this cellar into an airtight chamber, and will, when I leave, using a wax especially designed for purpose, seal the framework of that door, rendering this already dark and arid cellar entirely airless. I doubt anyone will find you. It's a condemned property due to be demolished in 2 or 3 years, by which time the chance discovery of a skeleton may create some small flurry of interest. But there will be nothing here to connect those corroded bits of calcium to the great Sherlock. Therefore, no threat of any serious publicity. I'm sorry about that. I know how much you were looking forward to a posthumous notoriety.
Watson, I've listened very carefully to everything you've said.
Couldn't very well be otherwise.
And I really must compliment you. You have devised what is, in my professional opinion, the perfect crime. Your preparations are meticulous, your choice of performers, the witting and unwitting, expertly made. But in all this, there is one fact which you fail to consider.
Here it comes. The ultimate coup d'éclat. It thrills the hearts of 50 million readers and boggles the minds of criminologists from Pagan to Peru.
You say you're an underling and you say you're resented, and yet this, the most remarkable act of your life, could have only come about by exposure to me, by my influence and my instruction.
Because of your arrogance and your conceit.
Oh, call it what you will. Who made you remarkable? Who allowed you to stand out from among your fellow men? It was I. It was exposed to Sherlock Holmes and gave you whatever credence you had. Without that, you were nothing.
So you say, so you believe.
No, you've said as much yourself. Without Sherlock Holmes, there is no Dr. Watson. If you kill me, you destroy the only thing that gives meaning to your life.
On the contrary, my dear Sherlock, your death is the only thing that can restore meaning to my life. But carry on, don't let me interrupt. The acid is almost ready.
Oh, you think you're so unique, so specially exploited? Well, there are millions like you. You're the drones of the universe. There are only a handful like me. One of my sensibilities is worth 50,000 of yours. Yours only have meaning in that they are touched by mine. Without my coattails, you drag in the gutter. Without my heightened sensibilities, you remain a clod of earth. Or you should get down on your hands and knees this moment and thank God that your paltry and pathetic span of time on earth was made remarkable by exposure to Sherlock Holmes.
Carry on. This is the music I want.
Yes, I ignored you, neglected you, took you for granted, spat upon you, shat upon you. What were you, after all, but just a sounding board for ideas you could never in a million years invent yourself? Elementary is what you always were, dear Watson, composed of brute and basic elements. Earth, air, water, but never fire. That was one element you always lacked. That I gave you. Or rather, you sucked it up from the conflagrations of my intellect. For years you warmed yourself by my coals, led by the spark of my flame, lived by the heat of my fire.
Dust we are. To dust we return. Elementary, is it not, dear Sherlock? Very elementary.
You cannot destroy essence. I am essence. I am the incarnation of life. You are dross. You are earth. Cloud.
Stool. Dust.
A bit more tea, Dr. Watson?
No, thank you, Mrs. Hudson. I've had 2 cups already. Just walking down the court with your delectable muffins. Fit for a king. And while we're on the subject, allow me to read you one of the letters you were kind enough to deliver to me this morning.
Oh, is it about Mr. Holmes?
Patience, patience. You see the seal?
Oh, is it? Oh, how could it really be?
Attend. In respect to the magnificent work conducted by Mr. Sherlock Holmes, whose eventful career both here and abroad, and the invaluable participation of his trusted aide-de-camp, referring to me, of course, Her Majesty the Queen wishes you to accept the knighthood in the next birthday honors list, so that the world will be able to witness the esteem in which the monarch holds the memory of this great sleuth and his conscientious collaborator. Of course, me again. We will be contacting you in due course to organize the details. Signed, Lord Privy Seal for Victoria Receiving.
God's truth, is it really true?
Looks pretty authentic to me, Mrs. Hudson.
Oh, oh dear. I wonder what Mr. Holmes would think if he was here now.
Something rather cutting, I suspect.
Oh, but I do miss him, you know. I keep thinking I'll hear his tread on the stair. He'll swing open the door and shout out at me like he always did. Wipe me boots, you slovenly old cow! You remember?
In his endearing harshness of manner, you see the heart as big as a bun. Life goes on, Mrs. Hudson, as it has these last 18 months, and I must say you've been a brick to it all.
Well, I know that's what Mr. Holmes would have wanted, to soldier on here at Baker Street no matter what. Wasn't it wicked, that fellow from Bogdor getting all dressed up to pass himself off as Mr. Holmes and getting our hopes up like that?
A throwback scoundrel.
Oh.
I knew in a trice it couldn't be Mr. Holmes.
And then there was that woman, Marty. She got herself into man's clothing and got passing herself off as Mr. Holmes as well. That cheek of that hussy.
An outrageous sally, which, thanks to my well-kept anatomical records, was exposed to the floor it was.
I just can't figure the number of wicked people there are in the world. Like whoever it was wrote that letter about me dying grandfather. And then when I got there, I found he'd died 12 years before, not one I can't understand who would do such a wicked thing as that.
Some warped and embittered individual, Mrs. Hudson. Some great imaginary grievance.
Oh, but you do think Mr. Holmes is still alive, don't you? He'll be back, won't he?
Of course he will, Mrs. Hudson. You know what they say about bad pennies. Oh, please, Mrs. Hudson, what did you control yourself? Let me mention the poor chap's name. He's
It's not that, Dr. Watson. It's the ceremony.
The ceremony.
I haven't a frock to be going to the palace with.
Oh, don't fret, Mrs. Hudson. I think we can stretch the housekeeping far enough to get you a proper gown for the Queen.
Oh, do you really think so?
Well, it's not every day we're summoned to Buckingham Palace.
Ah, should it be white, do you think? And a wee bit off the shoulders?
Since it's Victoria, I think grey and high at the neck would be more appropriate. Mrs. Hudson, the telephone, not the door.
Oh,
Go on, it won't bite you. Probably the palace.
the Holmes residence, Your Highness. Who? Oh, it's you. It's that Inspector Lestrade.
Good morning, Inspector. Suppose you're into the grapevine, eh? No doubt your own time will come. There's no need. Found him. You found him. Start. We've been through this before. How can you be sure that... Amnesia? Bombay? Really? I think we're wasting a lot of time over... Well, of course, if you think it's urgent, I'll come over and help with the identification. Here. Downstairs. Do you think that's... I see, yes. Testimony is home ground. Quite right. Very well, Lestrade, but I do hope this isn't one of your wild goose chases. Fine. Fine. Goodbye.
They found him. He's back.
Come, Mrs. Hudson. Don't get your hopes up. We've been through this many times before and have always been bitterly disappointed.
Yes, but Lestrade has never brought them back into the flat before.
We keep our wits about us. We'll be able to deal with the imposter.
But what if it ain't no imposter? What if it is Mr. Holmes?
Why, then I'll be delighted. We both will. What I mean is, it's best to remain skeptical to avoid a disappointment afterward. And now, Mrs. Hudson, if you'd be good enough to make yourself scarce for a while, this will be rather delicate of you.
Well, of course.
So they could accommodate Dr. Watson, he's just outside. The inspector, the fourth line, you're trying. Must be really waste time on everything. Sing one.
Tell you, Dr. Watson, the message comes. I've took him 3 times before, so how about waste my time with all that? Because it's just positively uncanny.
That's what you said the last time. A fellow makeshift plastic surgery began to wilt in the gas line. He was smitten, niche.
Waste the water. John Watson, maybe is it? Tell me things about your legal rights now.
You must have shit chat pass off chance.
Let's talk this out, don't know. Give me your water, signal.
Great pressing things my heart.
Take it off. Why don't we put your fencing on that? Tell them now, you should show us on. Give it work. We're going on to British like orders from my
Well, this time, so...
I appreciate it.
Hey, Bruce, what's the matter? What's the other so many months? Say something. You really don't know what I I said, what's up? It's got some action. What's he really? You make me say that.
Do I see?
Dr. Watson is a gentleman whom I thought. It's a very interesting story to relate. I told him it would be best if he told it himself.
Quite.
Come on, there's no need for staying on ceremony. Sure, they haven't changed that much. Why you certainly look the same. A little better fed, perhaps. I say, how's the Baron getting along without me? Much trade?
Before we become too deeply enmeshed, Mr. Holmes, may I remind you that you are not the first person to try to pass himself off as the Sherlock Holmes.
Don't bother, Watson. We both know the rest of them were sheer adventurers. Nice distinction enough being Sherlock Holmes, but to be the returned, restored, and resuscitated Sherlock Holmes is the height of achievement for any self-respecting imposter. The play's not fair either, unless, of course, we're filling the accounts.
The accounts are perfect already. But before we discuss the accounts or anything else, perhaps I should point out to you that although there is a striking resemblance between you and the man whose name you seem to bear, that has happened before, to no avail. You're aware of that, as modern medical science perfectly articulated by any person reporting having face uses.
Is that the case?
It is.
So that means it's over you.
And not only drugs, but more, very many other things as well. So I wonder, Holmes, if you would allow me to refuse to no doubt you come up perfect masters.
Investigated, but it's quite a switch.
Charles, you know where I this off the hall.
It might not work.
I think I must be.
So now you have these past the rest of our service general might be shown for science levels. That's not the thing. Two doors, big guys, Watson.
Certainly not, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, these are all similar matter. The problem is
Mighty flat, right? And I was on Kaasik. Is that right?
the devil in the essay, the makes sense, risky shit, you let him help you shut all day. And not say another day of such words. The trust is don't think like kiss it, what she should be. And then talk about what she asked. And I speak to the blood. Takes also the don't be so much as this wrong.